I did make that extra Google Sheets automation for you. Google Sheets is very problematic and has to be reconnected. And I think I even added a, yeah, here, this Zapier tutorial, how to, it's basically the error that Google Sheets typically has. A lot of times, if you just go into Zapier and you reconnect the Google thing, it will reset it. So, and honestly, like, you might just need to contact Zapier help, but I just want you to know, like, sometimes that just happens, it's normal. But if you go into Zapier and you look at the Zap history, you can make sure that things are working. If you get really technically excited, Zoe, that's how you do it. So I have a note in here, hopefully you never have to read it, but I just wanted to at least include that in there. Okay, and this has to do with this. It's so technical. I'm sorry to even say this out loud. I just want you to know it. It's out there just in case you need it. But when it comes to the deleting, that whole thing where I'm like, if you move it from stage 2 to stage 3, it deletes from stage 2 activities. Sometimes that will error. So if you go to the Zapier history and it says that it stopped, like Sheila, you got an email about one of them where it's like it stopped. But what happens is it'll search for the first one, delete it. It'll search for the second one. If it doesn't find one, it'll stop. So if there was only one activity for stage 2, it's going to show that it stopped, even though it successfully ran. So I don't know if that makes sense, but there it is. So not all errors are bad, I guess is my point. And then also, just so you know, over these tabs on this spreadsheet that I have for you, there's one tab that says tech stack, and that's just your passwords and your different, like, all the notes actually too. Not all the notes, but a lot of notes from before. So also, I set up a custom Google account so that I didn't have to go through you for every single Google Sheet change and things like that. So I'm going to assign that to your email address when this is all complete. So when you get the confirmation, just make sure you accept it. Okay. So when I was connecting the sheets and all that, I set up a separate Google account so that I didn't have to wait for you to, like, confirm things every 5 minutes. So I set up a third one. So when we're all done and we wrap up, I'm going to set that to your email address. I'll just need you to confirm it when it comes through, but I'll let you know when that happens.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts? Did you write down any questions, Zapier?
How do we keep track of that? Because it seems like they're always sending me emails of new, or is it just an app? I guess I'm not real familiar with what that's doing for me.
Yeah, that's where it's the engine. It's like absolutely the engine.
So don't worry about.
No, I mean,
with it.
One thing I was talking about earlier is that the automations can get disconnected, and Google is exceptionally glitchy about it. So they'll just disconnect because they're Google and they get to. So sometimes I mean, Zoe, one thing, since I'm not helping ongoing, you're just going to have to learn how to look and see the history of the zaps. And that's one thing I was telling you, is like, on that spreadsheet, I showed you that screenshot of the zaps that might show as halted, and it's okay. But the rest of them, you just want to, like, if it says stopped and errored or possible error, that's when you want to pay attention. The rest of them, if it just halted, it means that it got to a zap that just didn't need to happen. So for example, again, like if you're in stage 3 and you move to stage, if you're stage 2 and you move to stage 3, it's going to look for an activity from stage 2, and then it's going to delete it. Then it's going to look for another activity from stage 2, and if it doesn't find it, it's going to say stopped. Because if you go from stage 2 to stage 3, you might only have one activity.
Okay.
But sometimes you'll have 2. So I wanted it to look up 2 to make your job easier. So from there, you just want to, so that kind of stopped isn't a big deal. It's just like, oh, well, it stopped because I didn't find it. But it's pretty easy. Like if you go into Zapier and you go to task history, and it's on that spreadsheet, but you go to task history, and even if you get in the habit of doing it weekly, you'll start to get the hang of looking at what data is coming through. But you'll go, in fact, one of the beauties of recording this is I wanted to take the questions that you asked and make sure that they're answered in the video. So this will be one of the things that I'll answer in the video, is like, this is how you check task history. This is what I look at, because there are and Zapier changes all the time, which is awesome because it makes them the industry leader, but it's sucky because it also, you have to stay on top of it. But when you go to the task history, there's like tasks, and then there's, I don't know, some other word, but that's the word that you want to click. And that makes it so much easier to read. So I'll just go through those steps in one of the, and I'll just make it, that's all the question that gets answered in that video. So I'll make sure that you know how to do that. Fixing it might be interesting, but you know, honestly, even if you took some time at home and just went, I want to learn how to do this, like it makes you super valuable. So it wouldn't be a waste of time at all to learn how to do it. And it literally, the way that it's set up, I mean, it's going to save you guys hours of time. You know, even though there's extra steps, it's like, you know, like when Donna was like freaking out, like, oh, now she has to click a button. I'm like, yeah, but that one button is going to save her like, you know, 10 hours. So it's going to be okay, believe me. But so it seems annoying, but once you get used to it, and it's like you're used to seeing the same thing come up, even though it's one more step, having that data, if you guys can really sit every month and look at it and get the value out of it, you're just going to be, it's going to change your life. Like I started looking at my sales numbers and activities, and number one, when I do stuff I hate, those are the numbers I look at the biggest, because if I start increasing that and then I see my revenue go up, suddenly it's not such a bad task.
Yeah,
You know?
that's great. And I've needed that for quite some time, so that's going to be beneficial. You know how they said, or Dawn did, that it's compatible with Zillow? How, with Zapier, how do we incorporate anything, or do we even worry about it?
I've done it. Like I've done it. And I'll tell you exactly how it's compatible. As soon as a lead comes into Zillow, a specific data is passed through the website. And Zapier, the automation set up, that's how all that information got into Pipedrive, was through Zapier. So Zapier is really the engine that gets everything from Zillow into Pipedrive. But they just, like I said, they don't make it easy and they don't make it obvious. So they don't say like, this isn't my agent, but I just set it to like search for really specific terms so that it would catch it. And honestly, like LinkedIn, same thing. I have to like do all this fancy like backdoor stuff just to get it to collect the right information and put it in the right place to, you know, be able to use it. So, you know, I would say that, you know, again, the My Agent stuff, some of it, when I was looking at your Premier dashboard, I was like, oh yeah, I could see how it's going to bypass, like you're not even going to need Pipedrive for this client. You know, like there's a lead that you just won't even need it for. But then there are even My Agent stuff. It's, first of all, it's only good for a month. So you're a My Agent for a month, but you still have their information. So like, just keep like, I'm like, he's crazy. Like this is the best thing ever, because it's gonna like, of course he wants you to stay in Zillow, but honestly, like the fact that you can just, it's seamless. You know, they're already in there. The only thing is you do have to go back to Zillow and check on things, but just having those links are going to just make it like, okay, click the link, there it is, you know, just easier.
Good.